The smoke clung to the rooftops like a low-hanging ghost. Even before dawn broke over the city of Lumehaven, the sky was already tinted gray with soot. Somewhere above, at the top of the vertical city's tiers, golden lanterns still burned with a serene, flickering calm, as if mocking the broken streets below. Down here, in the fifth and lowest tier, light came only from cracked oil lamps and the dull orange glow of smoldering ash piles. And in the middle of it all, beneath rusted scaffolding and collapsing eaves, a boy stood alone, hands stained black, eyes fixed on something the world had long since stopped caring about. A broken lantern. Mika Solari crouched beside the ruined artifact, brushing away grime from its surface. It had once been elegant, filigree metalwork curved like blooming petals, and fragments of tempered spirit glass still clung to its frame. But the flame was long gone. No glow, no warmth, just silence. "Another dead one," he murmured. His voice came out softer than he expected. "Tired?" From across the alley, the foreman barked. "But, Mika, less dreaming, more sweeping. You're not paid to mourn trash." Mika flinched. "Right, sorry." He stood up, wiping ash from his hands onto his already filthy coat. Around him, others were finishing their shift. They were older, gruff men and weary teens, all marked by soot and poverty. Chimney scavengers. Lantern cleaners. None of them paid him any attention. They never did. By the time the work bell tolled, the fifth tier had begun to stir with life. Vendors pushed carts of stale bread and mushroom broth. Rusted lifts creaked as they hauled goods up to the cleaner districts. And the guards? They just watched. Their gleaming spirit lanterns hung from chains at their belts, glowing gently in the dim air, symbols of control. Symbols Mika would never touch. He kept his head down as he walked. His breath came out shallow, burning from smoke inhalation. His shoulders ached. But it wasn't the labor that weighed on him. It was the knowing. Knowing that in a city ruled by lanterns and spirit flames, he had nothing. Not a flicker. Not a bond. Not even a chance. The orphanage was quiet when he returned. That meant the others were out scavenging or sleeping. Good. He slipped through the crooked doorway, climbed the warped stairs, and ducked beneath the cloth curtain that separated his corner of the attic from the rest. A space barely large enough to lie down. But it was his. There, beneath a pile of rags and a hollowed book cover, Mika pulled out the object he'd hidden since the start of winter. The broken lantern. It didn't belong to anyone. He checked the registry seals. It was war-era design, centuries old, from before the current spirit clan system. Ancient. Illegal to keep, probably. But something about it made his chest tighten every time he looked at it. There was still something inside. No light. But something. He sat cross-legged and stared at it. Like he had every night for the past month. There was a crack in the spirit glass, almost like an eye. Every now and then, only when it was completely silent, he felt like it blinked. That night, sleep didn't come easily. A storm rolled in, distant thunder echoing through the metal bones of the city. The attic creaked. The lantern sat beside him, unmoving. But Mika's dreams were anything but still. He saw fire. But not like the spirit flames used by the cultivators in the upper tiers. Not clean. Not controlled. This was raw. Chaotic. Flickering red and gold and black. Like grief. Like rage. And at the center of the fire, someone was whispering. "You're the first one who listened." He woke to screaming. Not in the dream. Real. Outside in the alley. Crashes. Stone collapsing. Smoke rising again, but this time not from the chimneys. The fifth tier was burning. He rushed to the window. Just in time to see the side of a building give way, spilling fire and debris into the street. Panic rippled through the darkness. A spirit lantern had overloaded. Someone mishandled it, maybe. Or maybe someone tampered with it. That happened more often than it should. He didn't think. He just moved. Down the stairs. Into the chaos. Past coughing neighbors, crying children. He ran toward the fire. Not to play hero. Not because he had a plan. But because the broken lantern was glowing. He reached the collapsed zone just as more stone came crashing down. A girl was pinned beneath a fallen timber. Her leg was caught. No one else had gotten to her yet. The flames were spreading fast. Too fast. Mika froze. He had no power. No spirit flame. No lantern. If he ran in, he'd burn just like anyone else. But the lantern in his bag pulsed. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. He felt heat. Not from the fire, but from within his chest. As if something was curling awake. He moved. Crawled through a gap in the rubble. Reached her. She was sobbing, trying to stay still. Her ankle was crushed. She looked at him wide-eyed. You don't have a flame." "I know," Mika whispered. "I'm sorry." He grabbed the beam. Pulled. It didn't budge. "Please," she sobbed. "Don't leave me." "I'm not," he said. And then the whisper came again. "Then burn with me." A sound like a gasp of air rushed through the alley. Flames curved away from Mika. Just for a moment. The lantern at his side lit up, not with elemental blue or wind green or lightning white, but with a deep ember-red glow. A light that danced like a dying campfire. Faint but alive. His hands moved on their own. Ash spiraled up from the ground, coiling around the beam. Heat shimmered just enough. The wood cracked. Burned cleanly without spreading. He pulled her free. And the flame flickered out. Later, after the guards arrived, no one asked his name. They said it was luck. That a minor ember spirit must have sparked from the wreckage. That he'd gotten out just in time. No one saw the lantern light up. No one but him. And it was dead quiet again when he returned to his attic. The lantern sat in front of him just like before. Dull. Empty. Except, now it wasn't. Because this time, when Mika touched the cracked glass, "You felt it, didn't you?" A voice. Whispering. Inside his mind. It sounded like a person. Tired. And lonely. Mika didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat there in silence, heart thudding in his chest. He wasn't a cultivator. He had no elemental bond. But tonight, a flame had answered him. And it wasn't supposed to exist. The voice didn't speak again that night. Mika sat in the stillness of the attic, listening to the wind rattle loose boards overhead. The broken lantern sat in front of him, as silent and lifeless as ever. No light. No glow. But something had changed. It was subtle but real. The kind of shift you can't explain to anyone else, only feel. Like the first chill before a storm, or the weight in your chest when you realize something's watching you, even if no one is there. And the words echoed anyway. "You felt it, didn't you?" He had. And that terrified him. By morning, the fire in the 5th tier had been contained. The guards had cordoned off the area. People muttered about faulty lantern cores and another corrupted spirit. There were whispers of a cover-up. Someone smuggling old lanterns into the lower tiers, past the clan inspectors. No one mentioned Mika. Not the girl he saved. Not the other orphans. Not the neighbors who had watched him return, bruised and covered in ash. It was like the moment didn't belong to him anymore. The fire had burned it away, leaving only doubt behind. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe it was just a burst of ambient ember energy like they said. But then why had the lantern called to him? That afternoon, Mika skipped his shift for the first time in weeks. He climbed the rickety scaffolding behind the orphanage, past the rusted watch platforms and up to the wind-scoured maintenance tower. It wasn't much, just a stone outcrop with a few bolts and a torn tarp, but it had one thing he needed: solitude and sunlight. For the first time in months, he took the lantern out in daylight. Its surface was scratched and uneven, the spirit glass cracked but strangely iridescent, like oil on water. He turned it in his hands. Nothing happened. Not even a flicker. No voice. He exhaled, slow and shaky. "I didn't imagine it." No. Mika froze. The voice hadn't come from outside. It was inside his head, warm and distant, like someone speaking through layers of smoke. "You didn't." He looked down at the lantern, heart pounding. "Who are you?" There was a pause. "I don't remember." Mika blinked. "I knew fire. And war. I remember silence. Being sealed. I remember pain. But not my name." The voice carried an emotion Mika couldn't quite place. More than sadness, deeper than rage. It sounded tired. And alone. "You heard me? That's what matters." Mika swallowed. "Are you a spirit?" A longer silence this time. Then, "I was. But not like the others. Not one of their perfect little elementals. Not a pawn bred to be tamed. I was something older." Mika felt his throat go dry. Older than the clans? Much. He glanced around the rooftop, suddenly aware of how high he'd climbed. His legs felt weak. The city stretched out below, tier after tier, each layer cleaner and brighter the higher it rose. He was at the bottom. The very bottom. And yet something impossibly ancient had answered him. Later, back in the attic, Mika sat with the lantern resting on his knees. It hadn't glowed again, but the presence lingered, subtle like a sleeping ember waiting for breath. He whispered, "Why me?" "Because you listened. Because you're broken, and so am I." Those words settled in his chest like stone. He didn't know whether to be grateful or afraid. The next day everything got worse. It started with the inspectors. Two spirit-armored enforcers from the second tier descended with a flare of gleaming white lantern light, flooding the fifth-tier plaza with divine brilliance. They were here for fire containment protocol, which really meant blame hunting. Mika kept to the shadows, hood up, face low. He wasn't the only one. They questioned witnesses, took statements, scanned for illegal lantern residue. When they passed near Mika, he felt the broken lantern at his side grow cold, almost defensive. One of the inspectors paused as he walked past. A woman with silver robes and expressionless eyes. Her lantern was pristine. The spirit inside hummed like a caged storm. She glanced at Mika, just for a second, then moved on. He didn't breathe again until she was gone. That night the voice returned, softer this time, like it was learning. "You're hiding me." Mika nodded. "Why?" "Because I think they'd take you away." The silence that followed wasn't angry, just curious. "That's kind." He blinked. "Is it?" "Kindness isn't common anymore. Not down here. That's why you can hear me." Sleep came restlessly. The dreams returned. But they were different now. He saw flashes, shattered towers, a battlefield soaked in ash, and lanterns crumbling like dry leaves. Screams echoed. Not of monsters but people. Cultivators with names, faces, families, burning from the inside out. And standing in the center was a man cloaked in smoke, wielding a lantern that wept fire. When Mika reached for the image, it vanished. The dream splintered. He awoke gasping. At breakfast, the other orphans avoided him. Whispers followed him like smoke. Someone had seen the ember flare. Someone had told the guards that a boy without a lantern had walked into a burning house and come out untouched. They didn't believe it, but they were afraid anyway. By midday it happened again. He was in the alley behind the workshops when the voice returned with sharp clarity. "Someone's watching." Mika froze. He turned and for a brief moment, saw a figure dart behind the chimney stacks. Black robes. No insignia. A scout? A spy? He didn't know. But what scared him more was that the lantern had warned him first. That night the voice said something new. "They'll come for me eventually. When they do, you have to decide." Mika whispered, "Decide what?" "Whether to run. Or burn." Mika didn't sleep the next night. Not really. He lay awake, curled beneath a threadbare blanket, one eye on the broken lantern beside him. Its surface was cold again. Normal. Silent. But that only made it worse. The silence was heavier now, like a held breath before something shatters. And in the back of his mind, that voice lingered. Not speaking but watching. Waiting. It was no longer a question of if things would change, but when. By morning the attic felt too small. The air too thin. Mika packed quickly, slipping the lantern into a cloth bundle and tying it against his side beneath his coat. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay still. Not with rumors floating like ash on the wind. Not when they were searching. He made his way toward the old aqueduct district, where stone canals wound beneath crumbling bridges and half-forgotten tunnels. It was one of the few places in the fifth tier where spirit lanterns were banned. Too much moisture, too many risks. That made it safer. Or so he thought. He ducked under a rusted iron grate, following the sound of dripping water until he found the narrow alcove tucked behind collapsed bricks. It was a place Kale had shown him once. A hidden nook where orphan boys used to trade scavenged trinkets and make believe they were cultivators. Now it was just a hiding place. A pocket of quiet. He sat down and took the lantern out again. It looked wrong in the daylight. Too old. Too alive. Even broken, it seemed to pulse faintly in his hands, as if it recognized the path he'd taken and approved. "You ran." The voice returned. "Come." Quiet. Curious. Mika nodded. "I didn't know what else to do." "You're learning. Fear is fuel. Shame is kindling." He looked down at the spirit glass. It shimmered faintly in the dimness. "What do you want from me?" Mika whispered. "Nothing. Only to burn with you." Mika's breath caught. Burn. The word echoed through his chest like a heartbeat, but it didn't feel threatening. Not like the clan's lantern fire, all control and precision and ceremony. This was older. It wanted honesty, not obedience. And that terrified him even more. He stayed there for hours, thinking. When he finally emerged, dusk was falling. But someone was waiting. Kale Drossen leaned against the alley wall, arms crossed, an unreadable look in his eyes. Mika froze. "How did you?" Kale shrugged. "You're predictable. And you're the only idiot I know who'd hide in the old aqueducts with a target on his back." Mika's stomach dropped. Kale pushed off the wall. His spirit lantern, shattered and dormant, clinked at his belt, useless as ever. He glanced at Mika's coat. "You have it on you, don't you?" Mika didn't answer. Kale sighed. "I figured." A long silence. Then he said quietly, "They're whispering about a flare born in the 5th tier. Someone who lit flame without a clan lantern. The enforcers don't believe it, but the inspectors do. You're on a list now." Mika felt the air tighten. What are they going to do? Kale looked away. Same thing they always do when someone breaks the rules without permission. Pause. Erase them. Mika sat down hard on the nearest step. His knees felt weak. This was real now. Not just a strange voice in the night. Not just dreams and ash and accidents. They would come for him. Just like the spirit said. You have to decide. Kale sat beside him. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "You're not the first to find something broken and old. But you might be the last." Mika looked at him. "What does that mean?" Kale reached into his coat and pulled out a faded slip of parchment, aged, sealed in wax, nearly crumbling. He handed it over. Mika opened it slowly. It was a blueprint. Of a lantern. But not a modern one. Not elemental. It was shaped like his. Handwritten notes filled the margins. Ancient sigils. Phrases that had been crossed out and rewritten in different hands. Human spirit containment, non-elemental core stabilizer, emotion-linked ignition, unreliable, dangerous. Soulbond test failed. Subject unresponsive. Sealed beneath tier. Mika's fingers trembled. "Where did you get this?" Kale didn't answer right away. Then he said, "My older brother, he was a researcher. Obsessed with lost cultivation paths. One day he vanished. That's all they ever told me." He met Mika's eyes. "But he was looking for that. For your lantern." Silence stretched. Wind whistled down the alley. Finally Mika said, "So what do I do?" Kale smirked faintly. "What all the good stories say. Run. Learn. Grow. And when they come for you?" His expression hardened. "Burn back." That night, back in the attic, Mika knelt beside the lantern once more. His hands were steady now. He lit a single candle. The lantern did not glow. But the voice returned, closer than ever. "You chose." Mika nodded. "I'm not ready," he whispered. "But I'm not hiding anymore. Then we begin. Let me show you how to burn." And for the first time he saw it. A faint flicker within the cracked spirit glass. Not a flame. Not yet. But a heartbeat. By dawn, the candle had melted into a puddle. Mika hadn't moved. The broken lantern sat before him, flickering faintly now. A pulse more than a glow. Like it wasn't projecting light, but reflecting it. Matching his heartbeat. Or, waiting for it. He whispered, "You said we begin. What does that mean?" The voice returned, softer than before. Not just a whisper, but a breath. "It means you stop trying to control me. And start letting me learn you." Mika blinked. "Learn me?" Lanterns are cages. Chains. I was not meant to be tamed. I was meant to bond. The others, they command their spirits like pets. But you, if you want to grow, you must bleed truth. Mika stared. "I don't understand," he admitted. "You will. Close your eyes." He hesitated. Then obeyed. The darkness behind his eyelids wasn't still. Not tonight. Colors flickered in the black. Red. Ember. Smoke gray. He felt warmth rise, not from outside but from deep beneath his ribs. Not pain but pressure. Then, images. Not memories. Emotions. A cold rooftop, alone, watching clan lights dance far above. A broken bowl dropped by accident, and the orphanage mistress yelling louder than necessary. A winter night he didn't cry because no one would have cared. The lantern was showing him his own loneliness. This is where we begin. Your ember burns in silence. That is its shape. Ashen flame feeds on what others throw away. You want power? Then share your grief. Mika's eyes snapped open. He was sweating. The room hadn't changed, but something inside him had. Like a door had creaked open in a hallway he didn't know existed. He touched the lantern. It pulsed again, brighter this time. But only for a moment. Then silence. Later that day he returned to the aqueduct alcove. Kale was waiting. "Your eyes," Kale said, frowning. "They're different." Mika blinked. "How?" "You look like someone who's been crying without crying." Mika chuckled under his breath. "That's not wrong." Kale sat down beside him. "You're not going back to the orphanage, are you?" "I can't," Mika replied. "The enforcers are watching. I saw one near the lift today. They're narrowing it down. Kale nodded grimly. I thought so. There's talk they're sending a flame binder. Mika stiffened. What's that? Kale glanced at him, serious. Lantern assassins. They burn forbidden spirits into nothing. Even echoes can't survive. Mika's hands clenched around the cloth bundle that hid Ashen. The voice stirred again like a heat wave under his skin. If they find me, they will unmake you too. We must grow before they come. That night the second lesson began. Mika didn't light a candle this time. He sat in darkness, the lantern resting against his palms. He didn't speak. He only listened. The voice came slower this time. Patient. Like it was remembering how to teach. Flame follows feeling. I am not bound by elements. I am bound by memory. If you wish to burn, then you must show me who you are. The attic faded. The air thickened. Mika felt heat behind his eyes, and then suddenly he wasn't in the room anymore. He was in a memory. The orphanage hallway. 2 years ago. He was smaller, clumsier, a cracked bowl at his feet, cold stew dripping onto the floor, the mistress towering over him, shouting, red-faced, angry for no real reason. He remembered this day. He remembered the way his hands had shaken, the way he clenched his jaw to keep from crying, how he felt nothing at all, just numbness, like he didn't matter enough to even hurt. Now in this vision Mika stood beside his younger self, watching. The lantern flame hovered behind him, like a shadow of fire in the shape of a soul. Don't look away. This is the part of you they will never write in books. This is what gives you strength. Mika stepped forward. He knelt beside the small boy, and, slowly, gently, he placed a hand on his own shoulder. The boy flinched, but he didn't run. The flame behind them pulsed. Bright. He gasped awake. The attic swirled back into focus. His hands were shaking, but the lantern was burning. Not bright, not wild, but steady. A soft ember flickering within the cracked glass. His first true ignition. Then, something unexpected. The flame shaped itself. A flicker curved upward like a reaching hand. Mika extended his own. The fire curled around his fingertips. Warm, not hot, like it knew him. And in that moment Mika understood. Ashen wasn't teaching him. Ashen was learning him. Adapting. Reflecting. And with every shared memory the flame would grow. He whispered, "What happens when you've seen it all?" Ashen replied, low and gentle, "Then I will become your story, and you will become mine." It was raining when the flame binder arrived. Not that rain meant much in the 5th tier. It just meant the city above was dumping its runoff again, oily gray streaks leaking through the cracks in the stonework, dripping from rusted scaffolding, flooding the alleyways with cold filth. But still, something about today felt heavier. The rain wasn't the only thing falling. So were eyes. Mika stayed tucked beneath the aqueduct archway, legs pulled to his chest, the lantern resting beside him. Ashen hadn't spoken all morning. The flame inside the glass flickered faintly, like it was holding its breath. Kale was late. And that wasn't like him. Not after the warnings. The first sign came as a vibration, barely perceptible, like a shiver through the stone. Then came the silence. The market nearby, usually loud with coughing vendors and the clang of carts, had gone completely still. Mika peeked through the narrow crack between bricks. A man walked down the center of the alley. Alone. Clad in black robes trimmed with violet thread. No clan crest. No badge. Just the heavy thrum of spiritual pressure clinging to him like smoke. At his side, a lantern floated, unbound by chain or strap. Its light wasn't fire. It was white, cold, and hollow. Mika knew without asking. This was a flame binder. He ducked back behind the stone, heart pounding. Ashen stirred. "Don't let it touch me. That light, it's not a flame. It's a knife made of silence." Mika swallowed hard. "He's here for you. He's here for us. If that lantern locks onto me, I will burn backwards. Erased. You too." Mika bit his lip. "So what do I do?" The flame inside the lantern flared, just once. "We run." Footsteps drew closer. Mika stuffed the lantern into his pack and bolted through the tunnels. Stone corridors twisted in dizzying loops beneath the tier. Pipes leaked. Roots dangled from broken masonry. He sprinted through it all, lungs burning, soaked in filth, heart hammering like a drum. Behind him, silence. Too quiet. He took a wrong turn. Dead end. Turned back, ran again. Something flickered ahead. A shadow. No footsteps. Just presence. He felt it in his spine before he saw it. The flame binder was no longer walking. He was waiting. And the floating lantern glowed, quietly, terribly, as if sensing something just out of reach. Mika ducked behind a collapsed pillar, gasping. He's tracking you by echo. Ashen's voice was sharp now. Urgent. You lit me too recently. The memory is fresh in the air. He's not following your body. He's following your grief. Mika pressed a hand over his mouth. He didn't know what was worse, that he was being hunted or that his own feelings left a trail. You must bury it. Now. Think of nothing. Feel nothing. Hide me inside your silence. He tried. He really tried. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. And in his chest, where the flame had flickered so gently before, something else was rising. Not fear. Not yet. Anger. He wasn't a thief. He hadn't stolen anything. He had just listened. He had just burned a little light when no one else would. And now they wanted to erase him? Because he didn't belong? The pulse returned, fiercer this time. Ashen flared in response. Mika, control it. But it was too late. The anger wasn't buried. It was igniting. A low hum filled the tunnel. The air twisted, subtle like heat rising off metal. And then, from Mika's chest, a ring of embers spiraled outward, invisible to the eye but loud in the echo space of spiritual sense. He had flared. Accidentally. Emotionally. And the flame binder had felt it. The silence shattered. Footsteps now. Precise. Coming fast. Mika turned to run again, but this time something inside him twisted. The lantern on his belt burned hot, not with light but weight. Like a second heartbeat slamming into his ribs. Don't run anymore. Let me show you how to fall forward. Mika turned. He didn't know what he was doing. Didn't know how to fight. But he stepped out from the shadows. The flame binder stopped 10 paces away. They stared at each other. Man and boy. Polished robes versus ragged sleeves. One wielded control. The other, grief. The man's voice was smooth. Too smooth. You are not registered. Mika didn't speak. You ignited an unmarked flame. That is forbidden. Still no answer. The flamebinder's lantern pulsed, white and cold. I will cleanse the echo now. He raised a hand. The light narrowed, like a spear of frost ready to pierce. And then, Mika's lantern exploded with red. Not an attack. Just a flare. A shield made of smoke and memory. The blast threw both of them back. The flamebinder staggered, cloak flaring. His lantern flickered. Not destroyed, but disturbed. Mika coughed, stumbling to his feet. Ashen's voice was in his ears again, fast and low. We can't win. But we made him pause. That's enough. Mika ran. This time, the silence didn't follow. Hours later, he collapsed in the old attic. Covered in soot. Shaking. Alive. Ashen's flame flickered low now. Exhausted. Dim. You lit your first fire in defiance. That's the kind that spreads. Mika exhaled slowly. He wasn't safe anymore. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid to burn. Mika slept like a stone. No dreams. No flickers. Just black. When he finally stirred, the candle had burned down to a stub, and rain still whispered across the rooftop above. His limbs ached and his thoughts moved like syrup. But he was alive. And the lantern was still there. Ashen hadn't spoken all night. The flame inside the cracked spirit glass was faint now, more ember than fire. A slow, pulsing glow that matched Mika's breath, not his heartbeat. Not urgency. Just presence. He sat up slowly, back resting against the attic wall, lantern on his knees. The whisper came at last. You should have run farther. Mika let out a slow exhale. Didn't have the strength. You still don't. I know. Silence passed between them like smoke. For a while Mika just sat there. He didn't ask questions. Didn't speak. Just listened to the stillness. It was strange, how the more he connected with Ashen, the less the lantern felt like an object. It had weight but not just physical. Like a person asleep against his shoulder. Like company. Eventually he whispered, "What are you?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Do you really want to know?" He nodded. "I was a soul. Not born in the elemental cycle. Not summoned from flame or cloud or stone. I lived. I breathed. I fought. I burned. And when I died they tried to erase me. But part of me clung to the fire. A fragment. A voice. They sealed me in glass, thinking time would swallow the rest. It didn't." Mika sat in silence. He wasn't sure what he expected. But not this. "You were a person? Once? But not anymore. What remains now is a memory of that person wrapped in flame. I don't remember my face. Only how it felt to lose everything. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, Mika pressed his palm to the lantern's cracked surface. He could feel it now. Not heat exactly, but a weight of shared sorrow. "You're not a spirit," he murmured. Ashen said nothing. "You're a soul that refused to die." Still silence. That's why they fear me." Hours passed. The storm didn't let up. Mika remained in the attic, watching droplets streak the grime-covered skylight. Below, in the streets, people moved like ghosts, hoods up, voices low, eyes down. Word of the Flamebinder's arrival had already spread. The fifth tier had gone even quieter than usual. Everyone could feel the city tightening around them. And Mika had nowhere left to go. By evening, Kale returned. Soaked, shivering, cloak torn near the shoulder. "You're alive?" he muttered as he climbed through the attic hatch. Mika offered a faint smile. "Barely." Kale dropped to the floor exhausted. "You don't look it, but you just made history." Mika blinked. "What?" Kale reached into his coat, pulled out a folded sheet of damp parchment, held it up. The Flamebinder filed a formal request to retreat. Said he encountered an unregistered flame of unknown echo origin, and that it resisted core suppression. He grinned weakly. "They don't know what you are. And that scares them." Mika said nothing. His eyes drifted to the lantern on the floor. Kale followed his gaze. "What is it, Mika?" "Really?" Mika hesitated. Then slowly he spoke. "He says he used to be human." Kale flinched slightly, but didn't argue, didn't laugh. He just whispered, "Like the old war legends." Mika nodded. Kale sat back, ran a hand through his damp hair. "Then it's true." He looked at Mika. "You're walking a lanternless path." Mika furrowed his brow. "What's that?" Kale stared at the ceiling. "A theory. From back when cultivation was still fractured. When lanterns weren't just tools, they were memorials." He gestured vaguely. "Back before the clan standardized everything. Before they decided what counted as proper flame. Some said there were paths fueled by memory, regret, grief. Not elements. Flames that couldn't be summoned, only shared." Mika looked down at the lantern again. "I didn't summon Ashen." Kale nodded. "Exactly. You heard him." That night, Mika stared at the lantern long after Kale fell asleep. He thought about everything he'd been told. About the fire inside him. About the name that had been erased. "Ashen," he whispered. "Was that your name before?" "No. It's what I became. My true name was taken. Burned from the books. Etched out of stone. But if we survive long enough, you might be the one to remember it." Mika closed his eyes. The lantern flickered. And somewhere in the deep recesses of his spirit, a name began to form. One syllable at a time. Still silent. But waiting to burn. It had been 3 days since the Flamebinder left. The city didn't breathe any easier. Even in the fifth tier, where most people tried their best not to notice anything, Mika could feel it. That strange, unnatural quiet, like the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next crack to appear in the lantern-lit walls of control. The rain hadn't stopped either. Maybe the skies knew something the people didn't. Mika stood at the edge of the crumbling aqueduct overlook, water dripping steadily from the moss-covered pipes above. A thin fog curled around his feet like a sleeping beast. Somewhere far below, the drainage chasm roared, an endless fall of runoff and filth into the black. His lantern was warm against his side. Not hot. Not glowing. Just present. "You're ready?" Ashen's voice echoed softly, like it came from behind the mist. Mika didn't respond with words. Instead, he stepped out from the archway, took off his outer coat and folded it neatly by the wall. The air was cold, but he didn't shiver. He let his hands rest on the broken lantern, the cracked spirit glass smooth beneath his fingers. He closed his eyes and listened. "What do you feel?" "Wait," Mika whispered. "What kind?" He frowned, slowly sorting through the sensations rising in his chest. "Something tired. Something heavy. Like a memory I've carried too long without realizing." "Good. That is the ember. The seed. Now show me its shape." Shapes. It was such a strange way to think about cultivation. The Lantern clans trained for control, breath patterns, posture, resonance formulas. Everything they did was to contain the flame. But Ashen? He taught through feeling. Through moments that couldn't be diagrammed or copied. And yet, as Mika stood there in the mist, he began to understand. He remembered a night from years ago. The first time he'd watched a spirit light ceremony from the edge of the 5th tier's broken lift. Hundreds of golden lanterns floating upward into the sky, drifting slowly toward the upper tiers. Warm, peaceful, sacred. He hadn't understood then why he'd felt like crying. He did now. Because the world had made light something he could only look up at. Never touch, never share, never be. The flame stirred. The broken lantern in his hands glowed. Soft, not bright, but clear. And from the center of the cracked glass, a single ember pulsed outward in a slow spiral. Mika let it rise. The mist responded. Ash curled around his feet, smoke that smelled like forgotten things. Not just burnt wood or oil, but clothes dried near a fire after rain. Bread crusts too small to save. The last page of a letter no one finished. The flame was memory, and it was Mika's. He reached out. The ember spiraled around his hand, trailing a thin wisp of red. It didn't burn. It understood. Ashen's voice returned, calmer now, almost reverent. You are not wielding me. You are wearing me. The flame wrapped gently around Mika's wrist like a ribbon, and for the first time he saw it take form. Not a weapon, not a shield, but a gesture. A small curve of light shaped like an outstretched palm. Open, unthreatening, inviting. A symbol of quiet defiance. Mika felt something shift in his chest. A click, like grief finding a place to rest. This is your first shape, Ashen whispered. A flame that does not fight but remembers. Call it when you need to protect without striking. Call it when words fail and silence must speak. Mika opened his eyes. The flame faded, but did not vanish. Its warmth stayed in his skin. And in his mind the shape remained. Later, in the upper alcove of the aqueduct tunnels, Mika practiced the motion again and again. Slowly, deliberately. Always beginning the same way. A breath in, a memory summoned, and an invitation extended. Each time the ember returned. It flickered slightly with each variation, growing stronger when his intention was clear, fading when doubt crept in. It was a dance. Not of power, but of presence. Kale watched from a distance. He didn't interrupt, didn't comment, until the 4th hour. Then finally he stood and approached. You're naming it, he said quietly. Mika looked up. Yeah. Kale nodded once. That's good. All real techniques start that way. He sat beside him. What do you call it? Mika hesitated, then spoke softly. Grasping light. Kale blinked. Not very deadly. Mika shrugged. It's not meant to be. He lifted his hand and the ember curved once more, gentle as a breath, steady as a held hand. Kale looked at it for a long moment. Then softly. I think it suits you. The next day the city stirred again. Posters appeared across the 5th tier, cheap paper inked in red and black. Unauthorized spirit activity investigated near tier drain 7. Report any lanternless manifestations immediately. Reward offered for echo signatures and unregistered flame knowledge. Mika stood in the shadows of an alley, cloak pulled tight, and stared at one of them. They weren't hunting him blindly anymore. They were calling others to help. Ashen's voice came later that night. They smell your smoke. Now they want to own it. Mika sat by the window, candle burning low. His hands rested on the lantern, not holding, just touching. He whispered, I'm not going to hide forever. Then they will come faster. They will offer gold, power, lies. And when that fails, Mika nodded. They'll try to erase me. Like they erased me. A long pause. Then Mika asked a question he hadn't dared voice before. If I lose control, if you flare too strong, what happens? You won't become me. But I might become more of you. We're not separate anymore, Mika. We burn together. That night, Mika didn't dream of fire. He dreamed of silence. But not empty silence. The kind that comes after a storm. When the ground is soaked and everything waits to grow again. The first thing Mika noticed was how clean her boots were. They didn't belong in the 5th tier, polished leather stitched with gold thread, soles barely dirted by the ash-choked streets. Even the way she walked was wrong. Not careful. Not defensive. She moved like someone who expected the world to part for her. And yet there she was. Standing at the edge of the alley near tier drain 7, beneath a rust-stained awning, humming to herself as if she weren't completely out of place. Mika froze where he stood. The girl looked up, smiled. You're a hard one to follow, she said brightly. She couldn't have been more than 16. Delicate face. Hair tied up in a high tail with a metal clasp that shimmered faintly, spirit woven. Her coat was travel-worn but expensive. Something from the second tier, maybe even the first? Mika didn't answer. Didn't move. She tilted her head. You don't need to run. I'm not an enforcer. If I were, you'd already be gone. He frowned. Then what are you? She held out a slip of parchment, sealed with wax, not clan-marked. Independent. Serene Vel, licensed lantern path cartographer and spirit signature researcher. Academic division, unaligned. Tier 2 ascent permit, temporary. Mika didn't take it. Instead, he said cautiously, You came here, alone? Technically. She glanced over her shoulder. My escort got bored and left. Or he thought I'd be safer without him drawing attention. Hard to say. He wasn't the chatty type. Ashen stirred faintly in Mika's chest. She's not telling the whole truth. But she's not lying either. Saran stepped closer. He didn't flinch. She grinned wider. You've been lighting something unusual, haven't you? Mika said nothing. See, I have this little hobby, she continued, reaching into her satchel and pulling out a thin brass compass with a glowing blue dial. It's called spirit resonance mapping. And when someone lights a flame that doesn't match any known elemental frequency, I get curious. She tapped the compass. The needle spun wildly, then broke. Oops. Mika stared at the device. Why are you really here? She shrugged. Because the clans aren't the only ones interested in what's been buried. She knows about me, Ashen whispered. Or someone she works with does. Mika's hand hovered near the lantern hidden beneath his coat. Saran saw the motion and held up both hands. Hey, I'm not here to seal anything. I'm here to ask you a question. He narrowed his eyes. One question? Just one. She leaned in, eyes gleaming. When you first lit it, did it feel like someone was watching you from the inside? Mika didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was enough. Saran's smile softened. You're not the first, you know? He blinked. What? She reached into her coat again, this time more carefully, and pulled out a folded page. A journal scrap. Worn, yellowed, scorched at the edges. She handed it to him. He unfolded it slowly. The ink was faded but still legible. The flame listens. Not to commands but to grief. It answered me not when I shouted, but when I broke. I saw a face in the fire once. It wept when I did. I think it remembers being alive. Mika looked up, heart racing. Saran said softly, That was my brother. She sat down on the stone ledge, hands in her lap. He found one too. A broken lantern. Not quite like yours but close. He called it the Weeping Core. Said it sang when no one was near. One day he flared too hard during a training exercise. The flame turned into a storm. No elemental structure, no technique. She looked out toward the drainage chasm. They called it an echo anomaly. Covered it up. Said he had unstable talent and was removed for everyone's safety. Her hands clenched. But I never saw him again. Mika didn't know what to say. He folded the page, handed it back. Saran took it, tucked it carefully away, then looked up. I'm not asking you to trust me. Good, Mika said flatly. Because I don't. She smirked. Smart. Then her expression grew serious. But someone else will come soon. Not a binder. Not a scout. Someone clever. Someone trained to ask questions that make you say things you shouldn't. She reached into her satchel one last time and tossed him something small. A pendant. Smooth stone, black as coal. When that happens, wear this. It'll dull your echo signature. Not block it, just muddy it. Buy you time. Mika caught it instinctively. Ashen didn't flare. She's not lying. But she wants something in return. Mika looked at her. Why help me? Saran stood. Smiled again. But this time there was no brightness behind it. Just something tired. Because no one helped him. That night, Mika sat by the flickering candlelight in the attic, turning the pendant in his fingers. It felt wrong to trust her, but also wrong not to. Ashen murmured lowly. Her brother was like me, and now she watches for ghosts. Mika looked down at the broken lantern resting on the floor. What did the world do to you, Ashen? Everything. And then it asked me to thank it. Mika slipped the pendant over his neck. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But he could feel it. This wasn't just about being hunted anymore. This was about something forgotten clawing its way back to the surface. And someone didn't want it to be remembered. They arrived 2 days after Saran left. No armor. No glowing lantern. Just questions. Mika first saw him outside the aqueduct tunnel, speaking to an old street vendor as if they were lifelong friends. The man wore travel robes of cream and gold. His sleeves were wide. His lantern was polished but dim, hanging at his waist like jewelry. Not a weapon. A conversation piece. Everything about him was soft. Too soft. His name, according to the whispers that followed, was Velen. No clan badge. No enforcement rank. Just an official seal on a cloth tag. Echo Inspector. Ashen stirred the moment Mika saw him. He's not here to accuse you. He's here to make you confess. Kale found Mika in the upper alcove that night, eyes narrowed. They sent a listener. Mika frowned. Hey, what? Kale spat over the edge. High-tier interrogator. Trained to extract truths without ever drawing a blade. They don't chase criminals. They expose them. He looked at Mika hard. You need to be careful. He doesn't ask questions. He leads people to ask themselves. Mika touched the echo-dampening pendant beneath his collar. I'll stay quiet. Kale shook his head. He doesn't care what you say. He pointed to Mika's chest. He listens to what your flame says. The next morning, Mika returned to the aqueduct plaza like nothing was wrong. Velen was already there. He sat beneath the stone bridge, sipping tea from a lacquered cup, speaking softly with a cluster of children who had gathered near him, drawn by sweets and stories. His voice was kind, musical. And so, when the ember learned to weep, it no longer feared the rain. It burned even under water. The children clapped. Velen smiled. Then looked up. Right at Mika. Ah, he said warmly, standing. You must be the chimney runner Kale speaks of. Mika blinked. You know Kale? Everyone down here knows Kale, Velen replied, chuckling. He's loud enough. He stepped closer, arms open in a greeting gesture. No need to be formal. I'm only here to gather echoes. A recent surge of activity disrupted resonance flow through Drain 7. My job is to chart anomalies and correct misinformation. Mika said nothing. Velen's eyes twinkled. May I ask your name? Mika hesitated. Then, Terran. Not a lie. But not the truth either. Velen nodded graciously. A solid name. Stone-rooted. You strike me as steady. He didn't press further. Just offered a wrapped sweet. Licorice root. Settles the nerves. Mika took it. Didn't eat it. The conversation was casual. Effortlessly so. Velen never asked where Mika lived. Never questioned his flame. But every word was careful, exact, chosen. He asked things like, do you ever feel like the world watches the wrong people? Have you seen anything beautiful no one else seems to notice? If something loved you, truly loved you, but no one else did, would you still protect it? By the fifth question, Mika felt his hands trembling. Ashen pulsed inside his chest. He's peeling layers. Pulling you open from the outside in. Say nothing more. Mika stood. I should go. Velen nodded. Of course. You've been very kind. Then he looked Mika in the eyes. And smiled. I hope your light never has to choose between warmth and safety. That night, the attic felt colder than usual. Mika sat with the lantern resting beside him, the echo-dampening pendant warm against his skin. He whispered, I didn't say anything. Ashen replied slowly. You didn't have to. He left seeds in your mind. Questions that lead inward. Soon you'll ask them when you're alone. That's when they'll listen most. Mika gritted his teeth. Then help me guard it. The flame pulsed gently. Only if you stop hiding from yourself. He blinked. What? Tonight we go deeper. You want to resist him? Then show me the thing you've buried the most. The one memory you never let yourself remember. Mika's throat tightened. He knew what memory Ashen meant. He had avoided it for years. Drowned it in work, in silence, in the slow decay of everyday life. But now it was the only shield he had left. He lay back, closed his eyes, let it rise. It was raining that night too. He was younger, cold, standing alone in the orphanage corridor, just beyond the edge of the dorms. A woman in a dark cloak stood near the door, back turned, lantern dim. He remembered her hair, the way it glowed slightly under the light. She was crying though she tried to hide it. He had reached out, just a little, a hand, and she had turned, but not to embrace him, to leave. No words, just silence, a door, and the scent of ash. Back in the attic, Mika gasped aloud. The lantern blazed softly. Ashen's voice was reverent now. There it is. The ember you never named. That is what Velen wants. He doesn't care about your flame. He wants your loneliness. Mika sat up slowly. His hands didn't tremble anymore. His heart didn't race. Instead he felt still, centered. He looked at the flame and whispered, "Then he can ask all he wants." Across the tier, beneath a flickering lantern post, Velen wrote something on parchment. He didn't smile, just watched the ink dry, then murmured, "Interesting boy." The candle had nearly burned out. Mika sat still, eyes unfocused, breathing calm. The attic was quiet except for the soft sound of rain against broken tiles. The city outside was shifting again, rumors growing like mold in damp corners, feet moving faster along alleys, voices whispering lower. He had seen Velen again that morning. The listener hadn't spoken to him, not directly. Just lingered at the edge of the market, talking softly to others. Old women, orphan boys, chimney sweepers. All people who knew Mika by some name, even if they didn't know what he was becoming. Ashen said nothing for most of the day. It wasn't silence out of distance. It was patience, waiting to see what Mika would choose now that hiding was no longer an option. Mika reached down and unwrapped the lantern from its cloth. The glass was still cracked, still dull. The flame inside barely moved, like it was waiting for permission. He thought of everything that had happened. The fire, the flame binder, Serene, Velen. That moment 3 nights ago when the lantern had shown him the face of the person who had left him behind. He wasn't angry. Not really. He was tired. And through that exhaustion, something steadier had begun to form. Resolve. He placed the lantern on the attic floor and whispered, "I'm not running anymore." Ashen's voice emerged slowly, curling from the flame like smoke drifting from a low fire. "Then stand." Mika rose to his feet. "You are not an accident." The words wrapped around him like warmth. "You are not the crack in someone else's story. You are the flame they tried to extinguish before it ever caught." The words should have felt grand, dramatic. But they didn't. They felt like truth. Quiet, grounded, and heavy. Ashen whispered again. "Then it is time to light what they fear." Outside the rain had stopped. The clouds still hung low over the 5th tier, but the air had shifted. Mika walked out of the attic and into the alley, the lantern strapped to his side beneath his coat. The pendant still hung around his neck, dulling his signature, but he no longer relied on it. He passed the old food vendor who looked away. Past 2 sweepers who pretended not to notice him. But then a voice called his name. Kale stood at the corner, arms crossed. "I figured you'd do something stupid." Mika offered a faint smile. "That's your way of saying you're with me?" Kale rolled his eyes and handed him a small pouch. "You're going to want this." Mika opened it. "Ash dust. Refined. This burns longer than firewood," Kale muttered. "And brighter than your average gutter flame. Just in case you need to make a point." "Where did you get this?" Kale grinned. "I'm not as retired as I look." Mika tightened the pouch to his belt. The 2 of them made their way through the lower district, keeping to quieter paths but no longer hiding. The whispers followed them. So did the watchers. Velen would know by now. So would Serene wherever she was. And maybe others. People who had been listening since the beginning, waiting to see if the boy with no light would become something worth fearing. They stopped at the edge of the square near Drain 7, where the scaffolding split the air like ribs and the steam pipes hissed like breath. It was a place no one paid attention to. Forgotten. Until now. Mika stepped into the center of the space and unwrapped the lantern in front of everyone. Kale stood at his back. Velen stood at the far end of the square. And Mika lit the flame. It didn't explode. Didn't roar. It simply breathed. The ember inside the broken glass expanded, forming a soft spiral of red and gold, curling around Mika's hand like an old friend returning home. Ash followed, rising into the air in a slow arc, catching the light like drifting snow. The crowd didn't speak. They couldn't. Because they saw it clearly now. This was not elemental fire. Not wind or earth or lightning. This was not a trick of oil and spark. This was something else. Something older. Velen stepped forward, calm as ever. "What is this?" His voice cut through the air, gentle but edged. Mika didn't answer. Velen spoke again. "This isn't registered. It's unaligned. Dangerous." Still Mika said nothing. Kale stepped forward, then voice louder. "You've seen it, haven't you?" He doesn't need an answer. He's already written the report. He just needs a reaction to justify what comes next. Velen's smile didn't falter. Mika looked at him. "You told me once that warmth and safety couldn't always exist together." Velen raised an eyebrow. "You were right," Mika said. "But I choose warmth." The flame ignited. Not wildly, not in rage. But with purpose. It swirled around Mika in a spiral, forming the shape he had practiced. Grasping light. A gentle, open-handed arc of fire, shaped by memory, not will. And then something new. A second shape began to rise from his other hand. The flame shivered, then coiled upward like a thread of smoke being drawn into sky. A signal. Not of surrender. Of awakening. He didn't name it yet, but it felt like truth. The people in the square didn't speak. Velen didn't move. Ashen's voice echoed through Mika's spirit, quiet and proud. Now they know. They can't pretend they didn't see it. You're not the ember anymore. You're the match. And you have lit the air. Velen stepped back. 2 steps. He turned. And walked away. Not defeated, but cautious. Because the truth could no longer be dismissed. The spark had caught. And the 5th tier would never be silent again. Mika let the flame drift back into stillness. Kale stood beside him. That was loud, he muttered. Good, Mika replied. They'd been whispering long enough. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of ash and rain together. Not a funeral. Not a firestorm. Just the beginning of something that could no longer be erased. Back in the attic that night, Mika placed the lantern on the floor. The ember glowed steady. Ashen whispered one final line before sleep took him. You've given me shape. Now let me give you fire. And Mika, before drifting into silence, whispered back. Burn with me. The city didn't riot. It didn't scream. It didn't collapse. It watched. For 2 days after Mika's flame lit the square, no guards appeared at his door. No orders came from the clan enforcers. No chains. No violence. But the silence was heavier now. It wasn't the silence of neglect. It was the silence of watching eyes. The kind that didn't blink. The kind that weighed your footsteps, your breath, your thoughts. Kale noticed it first. He came back to the attic in the early morning, brows tight, cloak damp with condensation. They're not ignoring you anymore. Mika sat on the rooftop edge, legs dangling, the lantern resting beside him like a silent companion. Kale dropped a small envelope beside him. Cream-colored. Wax seal. Not clan. Not enforcement. Academy. Mika picked it up slowly. Broke the seal. A single page. Neatly folded. To Mika Solari, bearer of unclassified spirit signature. The Lantern Academy invites you to present yourself for internal evaluation and spiritual analysis under safe observation. You are not under arrest. You are not under sanction. However, unregistered spirit bondholders are subject to immediate investigation in the event of non-cooperation. Failure to comply will be considered an implicit declaration of hostile classification. You are to report by morning bell. Tier 3 lift access has been granted temporarily. No signature. Just a seal pressed into the page. Lantern marked. Bloodless. Mika read it twice. Then placed the page on the stone beside him and stared out into the gray-blue mist that hung over the 5th tier. Kale leaned on the rail next to him. You're thinking about going? Mika nodded. I should be terrified. You're not? No. Kale smirked faintly. That's more terrifying. They took the freight lift just after sunrise. Mika stood beside a stack of bundled iron sheets, the echo-dampening pendant now hidden beneath a clean set of clothes Kale had traded for the night before. He looked average. Forgettable. Except for the way the light flickered behind his eyes. Ashen didn't speak much on the ride up, but Mika felt the presence waiting in him. Warm. Focused. Ready to see the world from above. The lift creaked as it rose. Tier 1 disappeared beneath them. Tier 2 blurred past rows of carved stone towers and polished walkways, clean and distant. Tier 3 opened like a gash in the clouds. The Lantern Academy was not what Mika imagined. It wasn't beautiful. It was precise. The buildings were shaped like circles carved into stone, concentric, seamless, polished by age and arrogance. Spirit lights lined the courtyards in glass columns. Students in black and gray robes moved in patterns like the gears of a clock. They didn't notice Mika. Or pretended not to. A woman met him at the gate. She was tall, with dark hair bound in a spiral clasp, and robes bearing a green lattice sigil. She didn't smile. Mika Solari. He nodded. You'll be observed under Tier 3 Compassionate Observation Clause. Mika raised an eyebrow. That's a thing? It is now. She led him through the outer halls. High windows, stone benches, silence broken only by the flicker of lanterns. They passed students in meditation. They passed fire, earth, water, lightning. But not memory. Not ash. The room she brought him to was circular. Padded walls. One central lantern mount. A low stone seat. Observation hall? Containment chamber, she said. Then paused. Depending on how this goes. She gestured to the seat. Please. Mika sat. The walls hummed faintly. A translucent veil shimmered across the room's edges. A resonance dome. He could feel it pressing on his chest. Ashen stirred. They want to measure me. Mika whispered, "Let them." The woman stepped outside the dome. A voice echoed through the chamber. "You are not in danger. This is a calibration test. We will ask you to ignite. Nothing more." Mika closed his eyes, felt the cracked glass of the lantern, and opened the door. The flame spilled out. Not violently, not to threaten, just to exist. It rose around him in slow spirals, faint ash flickering from memory, curling in patterns that didn't match the diagrams etched into the walls. The hum deepened. The dome pulsed once, twice, then held. A voice spoke again. Flame identified, unclassified. Echo pattern unstable. Binding logic absent. Emotional saturation high. Pause. "We have never seen a spirit signature like this." Another pause. "Would you allow us to speak with it?" Mika blinked. "With Ashen?" "Yes." Mika touched the lantern. "Ashen. I hear them. Do you want to?" "No." "What?" "Because they don't want to listen. They want a label." Mika exhaled. "No," he said aloud. "He doesn't want to speak." The dome dimmed. "Test complete. You may leave." Outside the room, the woman waited. She handed Mika a folded slip of paper. "This is your temporary academy pass. You are not a student. You are not a subject. But you are now watched. If you choose to stay, you will be given minimal accommodation and monitored contact with select mentors. If you choose to leave, we won't stop you." Yet. She looked him in the eyes. "You've lit something they can't classify. That scares them. But it also tempts them." Mika took the paper. He didn't know if he was staying. Not yet. But he knew this much. The fire had entered the academy. And the academy didn't know whether to burn it or learn from it. That night, Mika stood at the edge of the academy courtyard, the wind carrying the scent of paper and flame. Kale would be waiting in the lower tiers. But Mika wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Not while the world was still pretending it had a place for him. Ashen's flame curled quietly around his hand. "You're not a guest here. I know. You're the lesson they didn't plan to teach." Mika smiled softly. "Then let's teach it loud enough they can't forget." The academy dorms were quiet by nightfall. Mika didn't have a room in the main hall. They'd given him an empty chamber in the lower quarter of the observatory wing, and used echo-sealed, far from the training courts and meditation pools. There were no other students nearby. No lights in the hallway. No flame runes carved into the door. It wasn't a room. It was a storage cell, politely cleaned. Ashen whispered softly. "They want us to believe we're here but not in." Mika sat on the stone bed, the lantern resting near his feet. The flame inside pulsed faintly, steady but small. "That's fine. Let them keep pretending." He stood and cracked the window. The courtyard below was still lit with blue fire ribbons that wound through the garden paths. A pair of students passed under the trees, their spirit lanterns glowing with cultivated harmony, one wind, one lightning. They walked with ease, relaxed, laughing quietly. He didn't envy them. But part of him ached anyway. Ashen shifted again, sensing it. "That ache is a tool, Mika. Don't hide it. Shape it." There was a knock at the door. Soft, precise, not casual. Mika opened it. The man who stood there was tall, wiry, robed in layered grays with a black sash over one shoulder, no clan markings. No visible weapon. But something about him felt sharp. Like a drawn line across paper that could not be erased. His eyes were pale green. Not cold. Just unreadable. "You're Mika Solari." It wasn't a question. Mika nodded. "I'm your assigned observation liaison." Again, not a question. The man stepped inside without waiting. "I'm not here to teach you. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to report what you become." He set down a thin leather-bound book on the table near the wall. A journal. Blank except for a stamped rune on the cover. A simple spiral, open at the edge. "You'll attend morning lectures. You'll eat alone. You'll train where they let you. And every week I'll write what I see." Mika asked quietly, "What's your name?" The man didn't answer at first. Then Lyrian. He turned to leave. At the door he added, "You've already made one mistake." Mika tilted his head. "What's that?" "You're still waiting for permission to grow." Then he was gone. Ashen's flame pulsed once. He's not wrong. But he's not here to help you. No one here is. The next morning Mika walked into his first lecture. It was a wide marble hall carved into the mountainside, echo-shaped for spiritual acoustics. Dozens of students sat cross-legged on flat stone cushions, lanterns beside them, all glowing in steady elemental hues. Mika's spot was marked, far from the circle near the wall. He took his seat without speaking. The instructor, a tall woman with firebound voice techniques, glanced at him but didn't introduce him. She began the lesson. Cultivation arises from rhythm, she said. The breath, the body, the bond. Elemental spirits respond to patterns, to balance. They obey law before emotion. Mika glanced down at his lantern. Ashen flickered. You hear that? They built a system to tame feelings. That's why we were erased. After the lecture, no one spoke to him. Not out of cruelty. Just habit. He wasn't part of the rhythm. He didn't fit the form. And that, somehow, was worse than hatred. Days passed like slow flame. He trained alone, out in the dew-damp courtyard at dawn, beneath the chalk sky dusk, or in the echo shed when others were gone. He didn't replicate techniques. He didn't memorize forms. He shaped flame by feeling. Each practice began the same way. He would kneel, remember, and breathe. One day, while remembering the moment he saved the girl in the fifth-tier fire, he shaped the spiral again, grasping light. Then, for the first time, he took a second step. He thought not of protection but of standing when others fled, of choosing to remain in danger because someone else couldn't move. The flame responded. It rose taller, brighter, then wrapped behind him like a crescent wall of smoke. Not aggressive, but firm. A statement of presence. Ashen whispered, "You're shaping your second form." Mika stood slowly. "I want to name it." Ashen waited. Mika placed both hands forward, palms braced. Held. Then whispered, "Stand still, flame. A form for the moment when you plant your feet and say, 'Here is where I stay.'" The flame pulsed. It accepted the name. That night, Mika returned to his chamber to find a letter folded neatly on his table. No seal. Just a line of ink. "Your flame is noted. Its shape is irregular. It is not welcome. But it will be tested. Tomorrow you enter the Ember Trials." No signature. Mika read it once. Then read it again. Ashen stirred. "They want to measure you against their scale. But you're not made of their metal. Then I'll break the scale." He looked down at the flame. It didn't flare. Just waited. And that night, Mika slept without dreams. Because the next time he stood before them, he would not bring a question. He would bring fire. The trial chamber was colder than Mika expected. It wasn't built like a battlefield. It was built like a stage. The stone platform in the center was wide and circular, ringed by obsidian mirrors set at even intervals along the walls. High above, spirit lanterns floated in perfect formation, casting white-blue light across the floor with surgical precision. There were no shadows here. Just the full weight of being seen. Dozens of students sat in the gallery rows that spiraled around the chamber's upper walls. None spoke to Mika. Most didn't look at him at all. A few did. Their eyes weren't cruel, just curious, distant. Like they'd been told he wasn't dangerous, just defective. A voice echoed from the observation perch above. It was flat, formal, recited. Candidate Mika Solari. Unregistered flame type. Self-reported spirit bond origin unknown. Entry permitted under observational exemption. You will begin the first phase of the Ember Trials. Mika stood alone at the platform center. The voice continued. Trial 1. Emotional resonance stability. You will step into the circle. Your lantern will be placed at the center. You will sit and allow us to measure the echo of your inner state under artificial pressure. Do not suppress your emotions. Do not resist. Do not lie. The last command was quieter. Do not lie. A door opened behind him. 2 wardens entered, both carrying curved resonance forks. They walked with precision and placed Mika's lantern in the circle's center, careful not to touch it directly. They stepped back without a word. Mika stepped forward and sat. The floor was cold beneath him. The room felt wrong. His flame, barely flickering inside the cracked glass, curled downward, not out of fear but distrust. Ashen whispered softly. They want to shake you until you crack. Then call your cracks weakness. Mika closed his eyes. I won't give them a fracture they can name. The mirrors around the room began to hum. A low vibration passed through the air, rippling across the floor and up through Mika's spine. It wasn't painful, just personal. Like something was brushing against the thoughts he didn't say out loud. Memory induction field, Ashen murmured. Crude, but effective on shallow flames. Mika felt it happening. Not an attack. A pull. Images flickered behind his closed eyes. The orphanage hall. The sound of a woman's footsteps walking away. Kale's voice saying he was stupid for staying. The moment he chose to light the flame in the square. Each memory flashed once, then lingered. The mirrors responded to each flicker of emotion. One glowed pale red. Another vibrated faintly. A third remained dark, unreadable. The voice echoed again. Your signature is unstable. You resist resonance induction. You are not sinking. That's because I'm not pretending, Mika whispered. There was silence from above. Please repeat. Mika opened his eyes. I said I'm not pretending. You're measuring echo like it's a substance, like it obeys pattern. But I don't burn because you asked me to. The hum grew sharper. Ashen's flame flickered once, then recoiled. Mika flinched. His breath stilled. Then the pressure increased. The mirrors began to glow in sequence, pulsing like a heartbeat made of judgment. Anger, grief, shame. They wanted to draw it all out. They wanted him exposed. Mika forced himself to stay still. The warmth inside the lantern dimmed. He couldn't feel Ashen anymore. Not like before. They were muting it, not sealing it, but surrounding the flame with noise. Mika grit his teeth. You're suffocating it. This chamber is a test, not a coffin. No answer. A faint vibration rippled beneath his feet again. This one was different. A memory not from his past but someone else's. Ashen's. He felt the echo through the flame. A battlefield. Stone broken by fire. Screams, not of pain but of betrayal. Lanterns shattered underfoot. Figures robed in gray and gold, standing in a circle, watching as someone burned from within. He felt Ashen's grief. Then Ashen's rage. Then the silence that followed. The image vanished as quickly as it came. Mika whispered, low and steady. You think you're testing me? But this room? He looked around at the perfect mirrors. This was built to make sure people like me never return. Another voice spoke. It wasn't the one from above. It was close. A student in the upper gallery. A boy with white lightning in his eyes. You call that a flame? That's just a flicker. You can't even keep it lit under pressure. Others turned to look. Murmurs. He's not sinking. He's unstable. He shouldn't be here. His fire's not real. The words rolled over him. Ashen did not speak. The pressure remained. The room held its breath, waiting for him to crack. Mika closed his eyes again and listened to his own silence. He didn't reach for anger. He didn't reach for grief. He reached for the moment in between. The moment no one remembered. When he lit the flame not to fight, not to protect, but to stand. That stillness returned. He breathed, then spoke one word. Burn. The flame didn't roar. It didn't scream. It refused. A quiet pulse spread from the lantern, deep and low and steady. The mirrors around him shivered. Not from violence. From recognition. Because this wasn't an unstable echo. It was something older. A resonance they had forgotten how to hear. Ashen returned in full. Your silence is louder than their noise. Keep speaking with it. Mika stood. The flame followed, curling around him. Not bright, not wild, but present. The trial voice above called out again, strained. Candidate Mika. Sit down. The trial is not complete. It is for me. This is a failure to comply. Then fail me. He picked up his lantern and walked toward the door. No one blocked him. Not because they agreed, but because they didn't know how to stop what didn't match their rules. Ashen burned quietly in his chest as he stepped into the courtyard beyond. Kale waited there, leaning on the stone wall. How'd it go? Mika looked at him, face calm. They tried to break me with mirrors. Kale arched a brow. Did they? No. Then I guess the flame held. It always does. They walked together, side by side, toward the edge of the academy where the wind met stone. And behind them, the trial chamber remained quiet. Because the boy who was supposed to fracture had left the flame behind. And it had shaped the room in its image. The letter was waiting for him when he returned. No envelope. No seal. Just a folded slip of parchment resting neatly on the stone table beside his window. Someone had entered while he was gone. Someone who didn't need to knock. The handwriting was fine. Straight. Unrushed. Mika Solari. Your presence is requested for an informal audience. No observation. No record. Just conversation. Third Circle Library. After dusk. No signature. Just a single ink mark in the corner, a downward-facing crescent. Mika stared at it for a long time before folding it into his pocket. Ashen's voice was quiet. They won't try to fracture you this time. They'll offer you polish instead. I know. That evening, he made his way through the stone halls of the academy. The third circle was quieter than the others, built into the old rim of the mountainside. Most students weren't allowed there. It housed rare scrolls, banned cultivation texts, and theory records the clans no longer endorsed. No guard stopped him. No echoes followed his steps. The door to the library opened before he reached it. A woman waited inside. She was older but not aged. Robes of navy and silver, fastened without ornament. No lantern on her belt. No crest on her collar. Her hair was braided down one side, and her eyes were the color of tempered steel, watchful, reflective, but not unkind. She did not greet him with a bow or a smile. She simply gestured to a chair beside the stone table stacked with ink ledgers. Mika sat without a word. The woman studied him. "You're not what I expected." Mika met her gaze. "I hear that often. Do you know who I am?" "No." She nodded, not offended. "My name is Inereth. I'm the vice marshal of the Academy's inner division. My role is to evaluate paths of interest that fall outside formal doctrine." Mika waited. She continued. "I reviewed your trial. I read the flame echoes in the mirrors afterward. Do you know what they showed?" "Tell me." "They showed restraint. Intent." Sit. She leaned forward slightly. "That's not instability. That's control. That's cultivation." Mika said nothing. Ineretha's voice softened. "You're not dangerous, Mika. You're rare. And that means you're valuable." "To who?" "To us. To the Academy. To the clans." She opened a thin ledger and laid it before him. Inside were sketches, drawings of flame forms, diagrams of unfamiliar postures, fragments of cultivation patterns shaped not by breath, but by emotion. Older than elemental disciplines. "You aren't the first," she said. "There were others. Spirit humans bound in fire. Voices that lived inside lanterns not as tools but as memories. We erased them." "What?" "Because we couldn't control them." She looked up. "But we might be able to shape." Mika stared at her. "You want me to let you refine what I am?" "We want to help you grow safely. With resources. With a place here. You want to contain me politely." She didn't deny it. "We want you in the circle, Mika. Not outside it." He stood. "And what if I say no? Then you'll still be allowed to train. For now. But you'll always be studied, never trusted. You'll live in a room no one else walks past. You'll eat at a table no one sits beside. You'll become a story we tell each other, not a person we build with. You'll be alone." Mika's hand drifted to the lantern at his belt. "I've always been alone." Inereth watched him go. She didn't call after him. Didn't warn him. Because she didn't need to. She had offered something the world rarely gave him, a seat at the table. And he'd refused it. Back in the courtyard, the wind was rising. Mika stood in the grass near the meditation stones, ash drifting from the flame at his side. Kale found him just before the moon reached its peak. "You look like someone who just closed a door he might need later." Mika didn't turn around. "I told them no." Kale raised an eyebrow. "To what?" "Control." Kale stepped beside him and sat on the grass. "That's going to make the next trial harder." "I know. They're going to escalate." "I know. And still? And still." Kale stared out at the lantern lights across the upper arches. "You know what happens when you don't pick a side in this place?" Mika nodded. "They decide for you." Ashen's flame curled around his hand like a whisper. "They wanted to turn you into a weapon, Mika. Now they'll try to turn you into a warning. Let them try. I'll burn on my own terms. And if they light the world to stop you, then I'll light a path through the fire." The wind shifted. The lantern flame pulsed. And high above, in the chambers of the third circle, Inereth stood alone, watching a small red echo drift through her measuring glass. She didn't smile. But she did whisper one word. "Interesting." The arena was already full when Mika stepped inside. Stone walls curved around a wide hexagonal floor layered with chalk lines, pressure seals, and elemental resonance pits. Above, students filled the viewing balconies, robes marked with clan symbols, eyes sharp with curiosity. Some watched with interest. Others leaned forward, eager for failure. Mika walked to the edge of the staging ring. He wore no clan mark. No ceremonial sash. No flame crest badge. His lantern hung at his side, cracked and quiet as if asleep. Ashen stirred gently. "They expect you to break. Let them expect." 3 other figures stood at the opposite end of the platform. Mika recognized 2. Aryan Velth, son of the Velth Lightning clan, already in his second advancement stage. Clean uniform, white sparks flickering at his wrists. His expression said everything. This isn't a team. It's a lesson. Sira Dane, water path cultivator, elegant and precise. Her hair was braided with 3 blue gems, the sign of synchronized triple flow. Her eyes didn't look at Mika. They looked past him as if he were already over. The third student was smaller, quiet, nervous. A wind user. First year. Mika didn't know his name. A voice echoed across the stone walls. Ember Trial 3, Cooperation Under Pressure. For candidates. 1 goal, Secure the flame crest from the construct core. Unity is scored. Efficiency is recorded. Failure is published. A shimmer rippled across the arena. From the center, a faint red glow flared. A construct, a shifting maze of light and pressure, formed with layered runes. At its heart, a flame crest suspended in a rotating crystal. It pulsed like a heartbeat. You have 10 minutes. The tone rang out. Begin. Arian moved first. His lightning crackled across the floor as he leapt forward, barking orders behind him. Windboy scout left. Dane, center flow suppression. Lanternless, stay out of our way. Mika didn't answer. Ashen's voice flickered low. Do you want to follow? Not today. The maze twisted as they entered. Walls restructured. Paths bent around decisions. The arena responded to intent. Syrah pushed forward with liquid precision, her water path slicing mist through the narrow corridor. The wind student hovered behind her, nervous but efficient. Mika moved along the side. Not separate. Not disruptive. Just watching. The others reached the center chamber first. The construct core stood tall, hovering and rotating slowly. Runes etched across its shell pulsed as Arian stepped forward. He extended his lightning. The core flared and rejected him. Backlash echoed through the air. Arian staggered, sparks cracking from his chest. The runes turned red. Echo rejection. First attempt failed. Syrah hissed. We told you not to force it. I'm the only one strong enough to anchor it. The wind student spoke timidly. It's shifting. We need resonance alignment. Mika stepped closer. They turned to him as if just now remembering he existed. Arian sneered. Don't try. You'll trigger another rejection. Syrah narrowed her eyes. Your flame isn't even elemental. You'll fracture the field. Mika looked at the crystal. Watched how it pulsed. It wasn't resisting strength. It was waiting for intent. Ashen murmured. You can reach it but not by force. Oh, let it recognize us. Mika took a breath. He stepped forward, slow and steady. The others didn't stop him. They didn't need to. They expected failure to speak louder than anything else. He raised his hand, opened his palm, and summoned the shape he had crafted in silence. Grasping light, the ember formed gently. A curl of red and gold smoke. No roar, no flash, just presence. The runes responded. They pulsed once, then again, then turned white. Synchronization achieved. The crest hovered toward Mika. Accepted. The flame wrapped around his arm, then etched a glowing seal into the air. Trial complete. Silence fell over the arena. Arian stepped forward, furious. You cheated the resonance field. Syrah snapped. That shouldn't even be possible. The pattern isn't elemental. The voice from above echoed again. Synchronization confirmed. Technique unknown. Path undefined. Candidate Solari, recognized. The crest flared and burned its shape into the arena floor. A new mark. Not of a clan. Not of a class. Just a spiral of red memory. Ashen whispered in his mind. You have given us form. Now they can no longer say they didn't see it. Mika turned to the others. Didn't speak. Didn't smirk. Just walked past. Arian stepped aside, eyes full of something he'd never shown before. Not hatred. Not dismissal. Caution. Back in the courtyard, Mika sat beneath the lantern tree. Kale approached slowly, hands in his pockets. They'll talk about that for weeks. Let them. You changed the echo field. No one does that. I didn't change it. I made it remember something older. Kale sat beside him. What was that technique? A shape for being present without apology. He looked up at the sky. A flame that doesn't bow. Ashen pulsed warmly. We are no longer their curiosity. We are their precedent.